Okay, so we're up to about 25 participants now. So I think we'd better kick off as we don't have long to do this webinar today. If I could just say good morning to everyone, and especially a very good morning or early morning to those of us who are in the US. And welcome to this Chambers Wales event that is looking at trading with the USA, opportunities and routes to market. Now, as you already know, this webinar is aimed at businesses who may or may not already be trading in the USA. So those who either want to start trading or those who are already trading and wish to expand that trading. The aim of this webinar today is to give you the confidence that the US is a market that you can access and to signpost you to the tools to enable you to do this. We are going to demonstrate the sectors to you that are the most sought after and the opportunities that exist for Welsh businesses in the US. Now, as you already know, this webinar is 1 hour long and it will be recorded, so please just bear that in mind. If you want to share any information during the webinar, such as your contact details or you have any general comments, then please add these in the chat function. However, if you've got any questions for the key speakers, then please put these in the Q&A function and we will go through these in the Q&A segment. Now, I'm very excited to introduce you to our key speakers for today, who all have a wealth of expertise and experience in trading in the US. And on behalf of Chambers Wales and Swansea University, I would like to thank them for taking the time to speak at this event today. So firstly, we will have Stephen Davies from Pandaren Whiskey covering exporting goods to the USA. Secondly, we will have James Davis and Chris Reed from We Predict covering opening an office and doing business in the US. Thirdly, we will have Russ Fromberger covering the US as a market and general overview. And last but not least, we will have Jacob Hickman covering how to get into the US, resources and connections. So as you can see, there is going to be a lot to cover in just 1 hour, but I am confident that this is going to be the best hour that you are going to spend this week. A bold statement, I know. And I know that the event is going to enable lots of new connections to be formed and more fantastic internationalization of Welsh business into the US. So without further ado, if I could now pass on to Stephen from Pandaren Whiskey so that we can get started with the exciting key speaker segment.
Thanks, Samantha. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share some slides with you and just very briefly talk you through some of the aspects of Penderyn. We've been exporting to the States now for about 10 or 12 years, probably more successfully in the last 5 or 6 years. And that's really been down to our selection of partner. I think probably one of the most important things that we have learned over the years in export into any country is finding the right partner to work with. So we don't open an office in each country. We export to around about 45 different countries. But we look for a partner company that can act as our importer and our distributor. And the States is no different. So we have one importer that would take us into the country. And then at this moment in time, we're distributed in around about 40 states through this one importer. The first importer we had for the country was a very large company called Sazerac, who I thought would be probably an excellent partner for us. But it actually turned out that they although they're a great company and we still do some business with them, they were just too big for us as a small and independent brand. And the key to success for our brand, and all of the images you see here in front of you today, these are things that are all exported to the States. But basically, it's a hand sell brand. It's kind of all about talking and tasting. And so we found it very difficult to work with a large corporate sort of entity when we needed to get to reach consumers and do lots of events, talk to people, and they weren't really set up for that. So it was only when we moved to another partner who are able to give us that, much smaller, still able to cover a large number of states, but able to do the sort of work that we do in terms of promoting and selling our brand. But of course, it takes time. I mean, you know, we had a good few years with Sazerac trying to make it work. And I think one of the key points, I think, from the session I would say to you today is whatever arrangements you put in place, you have got to give it time to see if it works and learn about, you know, the process of exporting. Now, if you look at these images of our brands, this is our Dragon range and then our Gold range. They all look the same as the UK sort of equivalents, but actually they're a different bottle size. So the first thing you discover in our industry is the bottle sizes are different, the labels on the bottles have all got to be different, and there are federal and state rules that we have to abide by in order to be compliant in the market. How do you find that out? Well, we do a lot obviously through our partner, but early days we actually recruited somebody who was a veteran of the industry to actually work with us as a consultant. He was working with a couple of other brands as well. He wasn't expensive, which was important to us because we didn't have a lot of money to throw at this, but we had somebody who could understand what in America is actually a 3-tier system for selling alcohol. They repealed prohibition back in 1933. And after that, every state was given the ability to create its own liquor rules. And so to understand the rules, you know, we did need to have an expert by the side of us. And in the first few years, we weren't very successful in selling, but my goodness, we became quite expert in understanding what it was all about. And so that stood us in good stead as time has moved on, I think you could say. Things like pricing are very important. You know, if you've got a 3-tier system, it's very expensive to get the product to market. And being able to find a way of pricing these products, which retail anything between $50 and probably $150. And you can buy a good bottle of bourbon for maybe $25 or $30. So, you know, we're a premium price position. And so we have to work very, very hard for our presence in the market. And for every one of these brands, including our single cask business, you can see here, every label has to be separately approved. Every product has to be separately approved for the market. So yeah, there's a fair bit of admin to do. It's not overly complicated, but you've got to know what you're doing. One of the nice things I think about our product is, of course, we are very Welsh inherently in nature, and we have a great story to tell. But it's a bit of a double-edged sword because nobody in the States particularly has heard of Wales or knows about Welsh whiskey, when of course they know a lot about Scotch whiskey. So the big challenge for us in the actual market was, how do we tell our story? Now, we've got a very unique story to tell, so that's the advantage, but not being Scotch, I think, is probably something of a disadvantage, but it gives us something to go at. The other big thing, I think, in being successful in the market for us is winning awards. Bottles of wine, bottles of single malt, you need to win awards, you need to get attention. And what we found was that actually working with this particular partner we're working with now, who are called Impex Beverages, they had a great relationship with people in the press in the industry. They had a great relationship with people who run the awards in the industry. And just by having the right sort of routes of communication, we suddenly found we were being more successful. We were winning more awards because we were placing it in the right way. We were reaching the right people, we were influencing the right people. And so, you know, having a partner that really works for you in that way, we found to be very, very positive and helpful to us, you know, as we've gone through. But at the end of the day, our product is I would say a hand sell brand, and it's about talking and tasting. It's about getting out, speaking to people. So you have to be prepared to spend the money to send brand ambassadors. You know, we don't recruit. In places like France and Germany, we employ our own brand ambassador. But in this market, we send people to the market because we just find it a bit more cost effective. We probably have a team of about 4 or 5 people. So probably a month wouldn't go by pre-pandemic when we would have somebody in the States somewhere or other. But I would say also that we focus very carefully on certain states, because you can't be present in every, you know, as a small independent business, you can't be present everywhere. So we really focus on those places where we feel is going to deliver the best for the brand. So just in summary, you know, the uniqueness of our brand and our brand story have been very, very important to us. The key point has been the selection of importer. The selection of distributors is not really within our gift. That tends to be something that's done by the importer. So we don't have a lot of influence on our distribution partners in each state, but we have a dialogue with our importer about who they're going to use and who they specialize with. Our experience has been that bigger is not necessarily best. We started with a much bigger company, but we are selling an awful lot more product now with a much smaller partner who is a right good fit for the sort of brand, the sort of, I would say, hand selling brand that we are. Finding passionate partners is the biggest challenge. Familiarization with the US regulation, the federal and state rules. I make a good example. You know, I had people going out to New York selling product. They didn't have a license. They weren't supposed to be doing it. They could have got us banned from the state. So if you don't know these things, you can get into trouble pretty quickly. So reach out and get experience, and you know, and I would say go to the market yourself. You know, do a little study at the start. It's worth it. You know, spend a fortnight, travel around, speak to people in market, and try and gain, you know, get a temperature for you know, how things are done. Labeling requirements, bottle sizes, I've mentioned. Building awareness and reputation, of course. Once you're there and you're compliant with the laws, you've got distribution, you're in places, you've then got this hard sort of job of building the brand, you know, shows and events, using brand ambassadors, a lot of online events. You know, I've been doing an awful lot of online stuff during the pandemic. It's been great. It's been really, really good, very successful. But now we're getting back to trying to get people out there as soon as we can, visit retail outlets. And we engage a PR company. You know, we do some PR, which is aimed both at consumer and trade. And there's no doubt, yeah, we were named, I think, 2 years ago as one of the top 20 most exciting brands in the US for malt whiskey. I mean, that sort of stuff is great for driving awareness and drive sales as well. And the last point on my slide there is about marketing costs. You know, what do we spend? Well, as a minimum, I would say we spend about 12%, which goes straight to the importer, goes straight to the people we're working with, as a sort of budget for working with the brand. But there's a lot of add-ons on top of that. There's a lot of things that we do. If I go to market, that's not included in the 12%. If we send glassware, if we do exhibitions, we would probably contribute outside of that basic marketing budget. So you've got to be flexible, and you've got to keep going. You've got to keep going to market. And the last piece of advice I would give is you've got to be patient. You know, if you appoint somebody as we do, you really got to give it 2 or 3 years to see if it's going to be successful. So that's just a bit of a flavour for the experience that we've had in the US.
Thank you, Stephen. It was really interesting to hear what you said there about the importance of having that story and of having those key relationships. And I think that's something that we'll probably see throughout all of the presentations today. If I could just pass on now to James and Chris from We Predict, please.
Thanks, Samantha. Yeah, I think having good partners is certainly key to doing this quickly and successfully. So Chris and I are actually going to talk through some of the mistakes that we made and some of the individual lessons that we learned. So we export data and analytics services to the US. Primarily, we do that to car companies. So actually choosing a location for us was pretty straightforward. It was either here in Michigan, which is where I live now, where most of the domestic car companies are, or we could have moved to the West Coast, where a lot of the Asian manufacturers are based. We chose here mainly because trying to maintain a relationship from Pacific time back into the UK is incredibly difficult. And we decided to be a little bit closer to the UK office. So I think we're gonna talk through some individual lessons learned. Are you there, Chris?
I'm here.
Great,
I think
good.
Yeah. Should we start with something that wasn't a mistake? That might be nice.
Okay. All right. So yeah, go ahead. You go first.
So so initially we took some legal advice on how to form the company and where. And it was really useful because we discovered there could be tax implications for our UK company if we formed the US business in a certain way. So if we formed it as an LLC, apparently the UK company could be considered to be doing business in the US and therefore subject to US taxes. If we formed it as a corporation, we wouldn't have had this issue. So we ended up doing that. And I think there was also a similar issue if we employed people in the US through the UK company. So again, we employed everybody through the US business and stayed away from that. And we'd also assumed that Delaware would be the right place to incorporate. Just anecdotally, it's where everybody seems to set up a business. However, we were told that if we incorporated in Michigan instead, where we were going to have our headquarters, our annual fees would actually be lower. So yeah, I think some of that early advice was really helpful, although perhaps a bit too expensive, James.
Yeah. So we did manage to find a accounting firm that actually specialized pretty much specifically in what we were doing. So helping non-US companies come in and access US automotive market. So I mean, that's such a niche provider of services. You know, we found them through various contacts and some trial and error. And I'm sure Russ and Jacob will, you know, will fill in some of their knowledge there too. But so yeah, I think that the forming the company went pretty well. Some lessons learned around financial year alignment, though.
Yeah, I think we probably didn't find the US accountants quite early enough for that. So yeah, at the beginning, we initially set the financial year for the US company as January to December, which is a natural thing to do in the US because it's their tax year. Unfortunately, our UK company was operating on the UK tax year, April to March, and we were advised later by the accountants that for consolidated reporting purposes, we needed to have all the companies in the group on the same financial year. So we investigated changing the US one. It turned out to be more awkward to do that just because we had a presence in multiple states. And I think administratively, it was just a little heavier. So we actually changed the UK one, the UK parent, to match the subsidiary instead. I think, yeah, we can definitely say, have a look at your parent's financial year before you make a decision on the subsidiaries, because it might come back to bite you like it did for us.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly kind of figured out that we ended up having to take advantage of slightly more flexibility in the UK system and working from that direction. So that the part of this process that I'll remember forever was, so we actually hired 5 salespeople in one go from our main competitor. So we had a kind of a running start, and we got a telephone call. The payroll system works here in most states twice monthly, so you get paid twice monthly in the US, which was a surprise. And then the second surprise was when we got a telephone call from the guys working in different states, when they informed us that there was not only federal income tax, but state income tax as well. And I remember leaving the office one night with Chris with his head in his hands as he made yet another telephone call. So perhaps you could help the guys out with that, Chris.
Yeah, I think another one where the US accountants, we hired them a little bit too late, where we just wanted to get everything going as soon as possible. We were sort of setting up payroll at the same time as hiring everybody. So actually, initially as well, we found out that we needed a US bank account before we could even get the onboarding process started with our payroll provider. And, you know, luckily we had that emotion already, but it did delay us enough to cause a few headaches already. But yeah, I think going back to the state taxes, there's 2 different types we discovered in each state. You've got withholding tax and unemployment tax, and they usually sit within different authorities in the state. So you need to make different tax applications to the state. And, you know, that's for every state where you've got employees. So we hired people around the US. So we ended up with having to do it in 4 different states. There's a slight caveat because in some of the states they don't have withholding tax, but you know, generally you're going to have to make 2 different tax applications in every single state that you're in. A little bit more workload than we'd realized at the beginning. And there was also something called workers' compensation insurance, which you need in every state. And I think at one point we even got that confused with the unemployment tax, because it's sometimes called unemployment insurance. Just another thing that probably costs a couple of days that we didn't need to lose. And yeah, as James said, in the end, what really helped us get through the process was getting these US accountants on board who could, you know, summarize what we needed to do with a bit more clarity. And they also helped us with the applications, because they can be a little bit awkward to navigate, especially sometimes as a foreign-owned US business. You sometimes have to complete the forms in a different way. And yeah, they really helped smooth that process for us. Yeah, they get a lot of credit.
And then before we even established the US entity and we were transacting business with US companies, there was quite a lot of forms to fill in for the US companies to even buy stuff from you. What was that one? Was that the
W8 Ben? Yeah.
W8 Ben. Look it up. It's a great form. So the other thing that we thought would be interesting to quickly touch on, I'm based in the US now and have been for 5 years. so I'm over here on what's called an E2 visa. The application process for that wasn't as hard as maybe you might think it is. We got some good legal support from that in the UK as well as the US. But by doing it on an E2 visa, we've been able to send other UK employees to the US on visas that sit underneath, and that's a pretty straightforward administrative process. And it has been invaluable for us to have people here. You know, being where your customer is an important thing, particularly if you're selling, you know, from business to business. And whilst it was a bit laborious and occasionally not fun, you know, the US immigration form filling process was actually not that bad. Any final thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, no, I guess I'll just add, it was really good to have the UK employees go over to the US just to help sort of integrate the two sides of the Atlantic a little bit. Yeah, I think we needed the expertise over there, but it was also good from an ethos perspective, just to make sure that you know, both companies were lined up. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
James is being quite generous, by the way. I think he's had a stressful time with visas, so yeah.
Yeah, and I guess just to close up, you know, one of the reasons we're on here today is that, you know, we want to support Welsh businesses in the US as we can, but both Chris and I are Swansea alum, so anyone from Wales, and particularly, you know, anyone from Swansea University, please feel free to, you know, reach out to us. We'd be incredibly happy to give you one-to-one advice.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Chris. That was really informative. And I think, you know, you went over, there's lots to navigate there. And it's important, as you said, to get the information, as much information early on as you possibly can. And that's why events like today are so important. If I could just now pass on to Russ from Burger, please. You're on mute, Russ. I have to say it at least once, didn't I?
Thank you, Samantha. Good morning, board. I want to just a bit of background. In 2003, I was part of a delegation from the state of South Carolina. We were hosted by a group called Wales Trade International, which was the trade unit of Welsh government. And very soon thereafter, I was fortunate. I was retained by Wales Trade International to become their U.S. Southeast representative. I did that from 2003 through 2011. My remit was basically to assist Welsh SMEs find trustworthy American agents and distributors for their products and services. SMEs were referred to me, and we worked together to locate potential American partners, primarily in South and North Carolina, my primary markets, for helpful contacts. Excuse me. Since 2011, I've been working with Wales Chambers. I've conducted 3 workshops for SMEs, one in Chester for the North Wales West Chester Chamber, one in Mid Wales in Newtown, and one in Penarth for the South Wales, former South Wales Chamber. From those seminars and working closely with Wales Chambers, we have in fact assisted several SMEs to mostly find agents and distributors. 1 or 2 actually did have a need to set up an American corporation. We're currently working with several more. When I worked with Welsh Government Export Trade Program, it was unique. I had worked with a lot of other European economic development agencies. And what made it unique is that many of the SMEs obviously can't afford to hire the large accounting firms to enormous fees, you know, $50,000 or $100,000 to help them do what they know or believe they need in the US. Well, what Welsh government did is they paid my fee, and in turn, I was working for the actual SME. We did joint calls together. And several of those companies did, in fact, get set up with agents and distributors. For the last 18 years, I focused on ways to develop relationships between Wales and the US Carolinas. In 2018, I began a relationship with the Upstate South Carolina Alliance to be their UK representative. Our remit is to search for UK-based companies that are looking to set up in the upstate region of South Carolina. What sets the Upstate Alliance apart from other American regional development agencies is that their landing pad program, which I think Jacob is going to tell you about, can help Welsh and other European SMEs make connections to local partners who can help them be successful in entering the American market. In essence, it was is much like the support offered by Welsh government during the years I was their Southeast US representative. Jacob and I plan to be together in the UK during the business week of 8-12 November, obviously COVID-19 permitting. This will include a visit to South Wales. If you're interested in meeting with us, please let me know, and we'll be happy to set up a time we can meet face-to-face somewhere in the Cardiff area. So thank you for joining us, and much good luck. Back to you, Samantha.
Thank you, Russ. And again, I guess you've touched on there the role of key relationships, and especially the role of the government in supporting internationalization there. If I can just pass on to Jacob now, please.
Yes, thank you and good morning. I want to say thank you for blocking off some time to join us today on this call. And I also wanted to let Stephen know I am available to be a brand ambassador and host tastings at my house. I will not charge you 12%. It just costs you the shipping cost to get it to my house. So just keep that in mind. I'm available. Okay. My team is not officially a government entity. We represent a portion of the state of South Carolina, but we are a public-private entity. So essentially my job is to represent the government side of South Carolina and partner with companies that are curious and interested to begin the journey for establishing a location in the US. And then we consult them at no cost with all the things that were mentioned by Stephen and James and Chris in terms of establishing a network and getting clarity with all the regulation and different ways that the states are structured and taxation and so forth. So for those of you that are not quite as familiar with the layout of the states, I wanted to show just a couple of images. This is, of course, the US. And I like to show this to explain that the US is so massive, as we know, but it is vastly different depending on what part of the US you are in. So if you are on the West Coast, over in the Seattle, Los Angeles section of the screen, James and Chris already referenced and acknowledged the time difference and how difficult it can be to properly communicate and effectively run a business in that type of time zone. It's also very expensive and it's heavily regulated, so not business friendly. And there's a lot of additional risk associated with operating and beginning in a state that is not conducive for doing business. In the middle section of the US, we call those the flyover states. There's not a whole lot of activity and density in terms of population and industry. So logistically, it's going to be difficult to operate there. And then in the Northeast, where James lives, it is a more of the US traditional big three automotive, industrial, and what we call the Rust Belt activity. But it's a different business environment that it is more expensive. There's more union presence, which adds additional cost to operating in the US. And then in the Southeast, where I am, and highlighted in the bottom of the screen is that pocket of South Carolina. That is my particular region. But collectively in the Southeast, what you are going to experience is a much more business-friendly environment and three very specific advantages. One is geographical advantages as it relates to all the industry that has migrated to the Southeast over the past 30 or 40 years. Secondly is the cost structure, and that relates to tax and power, real estate cost, and labor cost. So your dollar goes a lot further down in the Southeast than it does in other parts of the country. And then lastly is the talent. So in response to the massive influx of international firms locating to South Carolina and other states, we have established an infrastructure with service providers that are excellent at educating companies on what is the right way to establish your company right out the gate. How do you align yourself with your accounting needs to associate and maximize the dollar and avoid and mitigate risk, all the way down to how you hire people and how do you find those people. And we've got all that infrastructure in place, and we're very knowledgeable and efficient in how we operate and interact and engage with companies from all over the world. And how do we partner with you guys? Stephen referenced establishing partners and aligning yourself with distributors or whatever the case may be. That is how our state operates, as a partner to help you identify distributors, the accountants, the attorneys, the hiring agencies, and we essentially will build a full business analysis alongside you. And again, this is at no cost. So the next slide, please. Just to narrow in on where I am in the upstate region of South Carolina, I mentioned the large number of international firms that have located in the Southeast. And a majority of the US population is within a day's drive of my particular pocket. But what I'm going to communicate to the people on this call specifically today is what you should expect from an agency or a state like mine in order to maximize the benefit of your journey to the US. So I would encourage everybody on this call, regardless of what stage you're in, to lean on different agencies like mine. And I'm more than happy to partner with you and help you navigate the Southeast and tell you where you may want to be in terms of proximity to potential customers. But you really use those free resources that are available in the US, and you can avoid a lot of mistakes on the front end if you have somebody or a team like mine that brings to light a lot of things that we have discovered in our experiences in working with companies. And they sign a lease and hire a person right out the gate when there could have been a couple of steps on the front end that would have saved a lot of money and positioned you a little bit better in terms of starting up and scaling up in the US. And a big way we do that is relying on our partners here in South Carolina. So in South Carolina, you have a lot of the big names, the BMWs, Boeing, Lockheed, Michelin. A lot of these global companies do very sophisticated operations in South Carolina, but where we really thrive is that small, medium enterprise and our ability to partner with companies, regardless of industry or size, and really utilize these networks that are established within South Carolina and the Southeast to elevate your experience and align you with potential customers so that you have a revenue stream on the front end. And so what we're trying to do with international markets and regions and places like Wales is partner and show you a different path in how you establish a revenue stream first by interacting and engaging with South Carolina companies. And then you have the revenue. Then the next step could potentially be opening up a sales office or a light production, assembly, distribution presence in the States. It's all customized and geared towards what is best for the company and how do we partner with you to do that. The landing pad that Russ referenced is just that. So it's a combination of customized components to how you enter into the US, the customer interaction, the South Carolina business interaction, all the services that you need, all the way down to the real estate component, which we do all of that. And we have very low cost, and on certain circumstances, we have free space available for companies for limited time so they can come and focus on getting set up and established and all the mission critical elements that they need, but not having to worry about an additional fixed cost in terms of real estate and lease space. So that is our region, and I would say you should expect that from a lot of places in the U.S., but make sure that you're aware of all the things that are available and capitalize on that. Make sure that you spend some extra time, like Stephen said, and visit and see how the different states operate. And keep in mind, in light of the past 18 months, when you're considering a location in the U.S., pay attention to the individual states and how they have responded in the light of a pandemic, because some have shut down and made it very difficult for businesses to maintain and operate, while others have been able to function and get through that a little bit more efficiently. So there's a lot of things that come into play, and we are happy to help you and be a partner with you as you consider that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And again, I think a key theme there of getting the right support is absolutely crucial. So if we just move on now to the Q&A session, which is obviously really important. We have got some pre-event questions that have been submitted by the attendees. So if we just firstly go through those and see how far we get. So the first one is, how do you understand the different safety and tax rules in each state? And I think Stephen and Jacob were going to answer that.
Yeah, well, from my point of view, I think it's the most useful thing I did from the start of our experience of exporting into the States was to employ somebody from within the industry there, somebody who I think I mentioned in my presentation is a veteran of the industry and could really guide us. I mean, I think the question was asked about baby products and things, which obviously I can't answer on. Keep my products well away from babies and children in general. But I think in terms of understanding what is a very complicated import structure, as I say, a three-tier structure for alcohol, which has got a federal element to it. It's got the state elements, which are very specific. Some states have the government owns all the liquor stores. Other states, it's much more free sort of sale. So having somebody by the side of us who you could just chat with and say, have you got the answer to that? Well, he had the answer to most things, but the things he didn't have, he could find the route to speaking to the right people. So I think you need that local advice to really to help you navigate through, especially in the early days. And the second point I would make is doing a little field visit. You know, it's limited to what you can achieve because the States is obviously a very big place. But I went out and I met people who were potential customers and consumers. I met Welsh people in different Welsh societies. And, you know, the facts and figures that I saw on my desk were really amplified and illustrated then by going out and talking to people. You know, there were, for example, there were 1 million people at the time I looked at it, 1 million people of Welsh origin in the States, I think it was. And I thought, this is great. I'll be able to sell them all a bottle of Penderyn. Because when you go out there, you find that most of them are quite aged and a lot of them retired. A lot of them don't have $70 to buy a bottle of premium single malt whiskey. Or a lot of them are very, very serious churchgoers. And I couldn't see myself standing in the pulpit holding a bottle of my single malt up high. So you suddenly get a different perspective on the information you've been given. And that changed the emphasis of how we looked to penetrate the market.
You know, in terms of specific to baby items, that is going to be more of a federally nationwide regulated type industry to investigate and explore. So the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is somebody that would oversee that. That is, depending on if that's toys or you get into absorbable type baby products, then you have the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, that you need to make sure you're going through the proper certifications. And those are all the things that we help people navigate and get some clarity on. And what is the realistic timing for getting a certification or approval to sell baby products in the US? Those are all the things and the fundamental upfront items that we like to address with people so that they have a real good understanding of the timing, what is the realistic scale to market and speed to market once you establish your U.S. entity.
Thank you both. If we just move on to the second question, for manufacturing services, is it recommended to have a presence or distribution network for the US? And again, I think, Jacob, you were going to try and answer this one.
The answer is yes. There's a lot of competition in the US and how it relates to people that want to partner with manufacturing and be a service provider to those people. And specifically in the Southeast, people really appreciate having access to people and being able to interact and engage with people face to face. So it's not frowned upon. It is just more of an advantage for you to have a US presence. And that also helps you establish those relationships like Russ was mentioning, and really get to know people and earn that trust that puts you to the front of the line in terms of your bidding and ability to provide services to the manufacturing companies here. So that's something that we are very good at. And we had a group of 12 Irish companies over here last year, and some of them were service providers, and we opened the doors for them to Lockheed and Michelin and a lot of the manufacturers here. So just by being here, that gave them an opportunity to get a little bit more personal and intimate, and then let the bidding process begin.
Thanks, Jacob. Question 3, how important is social media as regards marketing to specific industries such as electronics, audio, and other more hands-on industries? And again, I think Stephen and Jacob were going to look at this question.
Yeah, so I think basically not for electronics, I'm afraid, but obviously for a product such as ours, which is a brand, social media is essential. And, we have a lot of communication direct with our customers through social media, and that's great for helping them to navigate to where they can find our product in different states, or explaining to them that it will be in, but it's not there right now, and we can help them having a good communication structure through to our importer and our distributors has been really important with social media, because if we're going to answer the questions, we need the help of the people who are working with us on the ground. So that's been quite important. And I've had some lovely feedback from consumers who've said that the response when they get a query about where they can obtain product and where they can come and see us at a show has been very responsive, because that communication has been in place. So it's a great opportunity to talk to your customers and build awareness. And doing online events, especially during the pandemic, has been enormous for us. We've been able to get product. You talk about doing a virtual tasting. How does that work? But it only works if your local importer can get product to the homes of the people that you're going to work with, and then you can conduct the tasting from, as I do, from the comfort of my own home. So social media has been, and online in general, has been very important to us, not just through the pandemic, but before as well.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is it is certainly advantageous to have a strong presence in just the U.S. mindset and culture in today's world, is the instant connection and access to information. So if I see an ad for Penderyn while I'm playing a silly game with my girls on the phone, that's going to trigger some interest and stimulate interest for me to go and leave my daughter at home and go pick up some Penderyn. All of it is important. Build brand awareness and really elevate your presence, and it all comes together and partnering with entities, and then a lot of that work on your own too, in terms of how you market and position your company for success.
I wish I had more customers like you, Jacob.
Thank you both. If we just move on to the 2 questions that are in the Q&A for the moment, because they are quite detailed. So I'll just read them out quickly. So Simon Cole asked, how do you manage sales tax within the US, and how are changes in relation to the Wayfair ruling affecting you? Will this mean that you register in each state depending on meeting the thresholds, or are there ways around this? I'm not sure who wants to take that answer.
I can probably add something here on the Wayfair ruling. So I think this is referring to the fact that you can be liable to corporation tax in a state, even if you don't have a presence there. So it can happen if you start to make significant sales into a state. Each state has a different definition of what significant is, which isn't very helpful. Some can be quite prescriptive, but others not so much. So I think as a general rule for us, once we've started to make sales, as a proportion of our overall sales, around 20 to 30%, it starts to become a consideration. But we've generally leaned on our accountants quite a lot for this. I think in terms of whether or not you meet the thresholds, like I said, some states aren't very prescriptive about it, so there's perhaps a little bit more flexibility.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else wants to add to that?
Yeah, just that like Chris mentioned, the sales tax is going to be different in every state, and there's ways that the states get creative in terms of reducing that liability, but then there's also different metrics on how they capture that sales tax information. So an example to use in South Carolina is that's a single proportionate tax, meaning that there are certain things that you're only taxed on that are sold within the state of South Carolina. And part of the incentive would be that sales that occur outside of the state of South Carolina, even though you are here making the product, where there's ways to reduce that tax liability on your behalf. So down here it's 6%. Other states it can be higher. So it really is a case-by-case scenario, and then all part of the education that we provide to companies on depending on what you're making, where you're selling, and how you're getting it there.
Thanks both. If I just move on to the question that Peter raised, the identification of a potential distributor in the USA is quite simple, as searching distributors of competitive products. Is a potential importer or possible distributor as well, or are they different types of companies? If they are different types of companies, what are the routes to locating and identifying them?
I'm happy to comment on that. I mean, I think the best way to find those sort of people is to go to trade shows and consumer shows in country. I think Peter's right. You look at what your competitors are doing. Certainly in Penderyn's case, because most of the brands in our industry are owned by the likes of Diageo and Bacardi and Campari and people like that, they have their own distribution, which isn't open to the smaller independent companies. So we tend to find ourselves in the same stable as maybe like brands. That isn't always ideal, and that doesn't mean that you're with good partners. But there tends to be a lot of chat between the various competing brands about who's good, who's not good. And I'm afraid, you need to take the time and find out and try and get a little bit of depth on, what's going on in the market. Because as I said earlier, if you jump in, you need a couple of years to see whether a partner's going to work out, I think. So you don't want to jump into a partnership until you've done a good bit of research. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Stephen. I believe Peter did have his hand up. If you have got another question to add, please just add it in the Q&A function. For the time being, I'll just go back to the pre-event questions. So question 4 was practical methodologies for establishing a business foothold in the USA from the UK. And again, I think, Stephen, you were going to answer this one.
Yeah, I think just briefly, one of the things that we've had to do and you've got to do is keep returning frequently. You can't just make a trip and then set something up and hope it's going to work. I think you have to keep returning to market, especially in the early days, on a very regular basis, because that's you're building relationships. What I found in the early days, I would do things and they would work well when I was in the market, and as soon as I'd come away, the whole thing would stop. And then you think, oh, what's happened? So you have to keep going back. And the other thing that I found has been really interesting is having a really good, honest and open relationship with the partner you're working with. I mean, I was on with our importer in America last night, and I asked him some questions, and I didn't like the answers particularly. I wanted him to do some stuff for us, and he said, well, I can't do that. But we know where we stand, we know where we are with it. And I really value the fact that he doesn't say to me, okay, I'll give it a try, actually knowing in the back of his mind it's not going to work. And I say to him, okay, that's fine. You know the market better than me. I'm telling you what I think we could do. But at the end of the day, we have the relationship where I know that he's given me the right answer for, I don't think he's trying to lead me on, and we're clear where we're going. So you've got to keep working the relationship. If it's a importer type relationship or distributor type relationship, you've got to work hard on that.
Thanks, Stephen. If we move on to question 5. Someone said they've found it difficult to establish a sales pipeline to clients in the USA. They worked recently for Lenovo and in earlier days for Cisco, but it has been difficult to establish an ongoing relationship due to procurement rules. And I think it was going to be Jacob that was going to answer this.
Yes, this goes back to finding organizations like mine that have a real good pulse on the local industry and existing industry partners within the area to elevate that experience and get you aligned with customers. And it's one thing to get a warm introduction. It's another thing to be in an environment like ours where the companies have raised their hand and said, we would like to do business with international companies and companies considering moving in. So we rely on our partners to really make that experience seamless, but also accelerate the process to get people engaged in potential sales discussions with industry and new customers. So targeting groups like mine, I think, is a good way to recalibrate your efforts and get in front of the people that have already said that they're willing to engage and work and do business with international firms.
Thank you. If we just move on to question 6, is paying by check still the preferred way of settling debts? And I think Chris was going to answer this.
Yeah, the simple answer is yes, it's definitely the preferred way in my experience. I think I'll add, though, that you can normally get wire details from a supplier and pay them that way. You just have to reach out to them first. I think I'll say it in the other direction as well. So from our clients, generally they accept paying by wire transfer. We have the odd check turn up, but normally if you put on the invoice your wire details and ask for it in that form, you can get it. You can get it that way as well. But they definitely prefer check still.
Okay, great, thanks. Peter's just asked another question that actually links very well with the pre-existing question 7. So that was the evolution of trade between the UK and USA versus UK and Asia. And what Peter's just asked is the post-Brexit balance changed with USA and Europe. So I think it was going to be Jacob that was going to try and take that answer.
Yeah, Peter, thank you. I've spent a lot of time in the UK, and my very first trip over there, I was walking through a museum in Manchester, and there was a barrel of raw material from Greenville, South Carolina. So the evolution goes back to the similarities and alignment, which is why South Carolina and the Southeast, I think, is a real good fit for the UK, is the DNA and the history from being textiles to transitioning into precision manufacturing and a lot of innovation and technology. So we're very well aligned with companies. The evolution as it relates to Asia, that is more of a longer term investment, and a lot of the Asia investment in the States resides over on the West Coast, and it's just because of the positioning and the geography. And my equivalent of economic development over in Oregon, they don't target and work with companies as much as they do with capital groups that are coming out of China to invest in real estate and stuff, and different types of more financially driven activity. Whereas here in the Southeast, we're aligning ourselves with partners, import, export, establishing roadmaps, and working with companies not only coming in, but how do we get our South Carolina companies doing trade and doing business over in the UK.
Thank you, Jacob. There's a related question that's just come in the Q&A. So are there any thoughts about a reduction in USA Chinese tariffs and whether these will be reduced, or is it the expectation that these will remain and at the same levels for the foreseeable? I'm not sure if anyone can answer that. If not, then I'm sure it's something that we can answer after post the event when the email goes out. If I just move on to question 8 in the pre-existing questions. So what is the most cost-efficient route to trade with the USA?
I'll take one. So we started off by spending time in market, maybe a week or two at a time. you can win customers in the US by coming over and establishing relationships, you know, a week at a time. But as Stephen says, you know, once you go back, it can be difficult to maintain those. You know, we are two countries separated by a common language, and you know, and I feel that more as a British person in the US than maybe I ever have done. And just because we talk the same language doesn't mean to say that we do things in the same way at all. And you know, you need to be very flexible when you first start doing business over here. I would be taking conference calls at 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, when I was based in the UK, don't expect anyone to show up to a meeting at whatever time this is in the UK, 10:30. Like, your day is going to extend, and it's even worse than that because the American business culture is to be always on anyway, which means if you're exposed to the West Coast, you're pretty much looking at a 24-hour day. So it is possible to start doing business from the UK. You know, we've done it. Stephen's done it. It takes a lot of effort, but I mean, I would compel you to be, you know, brave. You know, get over here. It's a much bigger marketplace. Like, it's such an obvious thing to say. It's much bigger. It's here. It's possible. Yeah, I'd take a chance.
Thank you, James. I think we'll have to stop the Q&A there just because we're running out of time now. So I would just like to thank all of the speakers for making the time to speak at this event today and for giving such a wonderful insight into trading in the US. And obviously to thank all the attendees for their questions. And I'm sure you found the answers to be very informative. There will be a post-event email going out with more answers to the questions that we haven't been able to cover in the webinar. And we will also be sending out a link to the recorded webinar as well. But before we go, what I would like to do is to ask each speaker to summarize, if they can, in just one sentence, because we have 2 minutes left. If you were never going to see our attendees again, and you could give them one sentence that would stay with them and help them in this journey, what would that be? And if I could just start with Stephen first, please.
I think the two qualities you need really are a lot of patience and a lot of determination. And whether you're going to move permanently to the States or what you're going to do as we do with other countries, and you're back and forth, you need, singularly for us, we need a good partner, but you need that patience and determination to see you through, because it's not easy. But if you've decided you're going to be an exporting company, then these things are not problems, they're just part of doing business.
Thank you, Stephen. If I just pass on now to James and Chris.
Yeah, I'll go first. It's possible to find a really good partner over here, and don't be afraid to try and find someone very specific. You know, because of the size of the market, you know, there are some very niche advisors here that, you know, will help you do things quickly. But ultimately, I'd get on a plane and get over here.
I think I just add that, I guess, whatever your interaction with the US, having the support of local experts on the ground over there is just really important. I think our life was a lot more difficult before we started working with experts who knew what they were doing.
Thank you both. If I just pass on to Russ now. You're on mute again. Sorry, Russ.
Yeah. What I've heard is everybody feels you need to find a trusted partner. And so I'm going to be very brief. I could talk about this for a long time. You need to understand that the way economic development works in the United States, broadly speaking, not just in the Southeast or in the Carolinas, is identify at least where you would like to go, say the Southeast. The states for SMEs, in my opinion, the economic development agency at the state level are not the place to go. Identify agencies such as Jacobs. They're called regional economic development agencies. They should be easy to find on Google. These people can answer virtually every question or get you to people who can answer them. And the best of all, They don't charge anything. So I'd like to leave that with all of you. Is I think it modifies what Stephen and James and Chris have said.
Thanks, Russ. If we can just pass on to Jacob now, finally.
Okay, great. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us this morning. I would simply say, take advantage of the free resources that exist, and know that the states are aggressive and very interested in attracting new companies that build their economies. So it doesn't have to be me. I'm happy and very willing to engage with you and work with you. But if it's somebody else, make sure you are utilizing and maximizing the benefit of all the free resources to help you make that journey and be brave. And it's just a good way to complement your efforts.
Samantha, I'm sorry, I know you want to cut off, but I think this is important for the group to know. I'm working with Welsh Government, the trade team, as well as Wales Chambers. We're targeting a trade mission to the Carolinas in 2022, when hopefully by then we certainly will be able to travel again. So for those who are members of the Wales Chamber, I'm sure they'll be letting you know. And so I'm hopeful that we'll have an announcement sometime in the spring.
Thanks for that, Russ. And thank you everyone for your answers there. As I said, remember to look out for the post-event email, because that's going to have a lot of information on it. And if I can just check, Sarah and Rebecca, is there anything else that you want to add or you want to cover before we finish up?
No, all good. Thank you very much for sharing today, Samantha, and thank you everybody for joining us.
That's okay. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you found it really informative.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.